Welcome to the Explainer. So, have you ever wondered why perfectly logical, totally rational individual choices can just completely torpedo our collective sustainability goals? Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating paper by Paul Pajot that attempts to actually put a mathematical number on the cost of selfishness. It introduces this concept called the Circular Kahampatan Index, which is a completely new way of looking at why the circular economy breaks down in the real world. We've got a fantastic roadmap today. We'll start with the circular diagnostic gap, move on to measuring the price of anarchy, dive into the Philippine informal economy, explore classical to quantum scaling, and finally wrap up with Kahampatan beyond just waste. Section 1. The circular diagnostic gap. We're going to look at where current circular economy measurements are, well, missing the human element. We really have to ask ourselves, why is it that perfectly good recycling plans fail? I mean, a route to recycle a plastic bottle or recover some metal can be physically and technically available, yet somehow those materials still end up in a landfill. We've got the technology, we have the material, so what exactly is breaking down here? The paper argues that current metrics, things like the material circularity indicator, they're great at telling us what happens to physical materials, but they suffer from this massive diagnostic gap. They completely miss why it happens, and that why is largely driven by hidden human incentives and individual economic rationality. Look at it this way. If a recycling route is available, but it's just privately unattractive because it's too risky or too complicated, well, the material simply leaks right out of the system. All right, moving into Section 2, measuring price of anarchy. How exactly do we apply game theory in the circular economy to measure those hidden incentives? To actually quantify this human friction, the author introduces the Circular Kahampatan Index, or CKI. And this is built on a brilliant game theory concept called the price of anarchy. It basically compares the total cost of a system when everyone acts completely selfishly, which is a worst-case Nash equilibrium, against the cost of the system if an all-knowing planner coordinated everyone perfectly. The CKI flips this ratio around to give us an alignment score. It's essentially a battle between two extremes, right? On one side, you have the Nash equilibrium. This is a stylized representation of decentralized, selfish routing behavior where every single actor is strictly minimizing their own immediate costs. Then, on the other side, you have the social optimum. This is our coordinated utopia, where collective system costs, including those pesky environmental leakage penalties, are minimized. The gap between these two worlds, that is the exact measure of our incentive misalignment. And when the researcher ran simulations using this game theory model, a pretty stark pattern emerged. The social optimum, our coordinated utopia, adopts circular recycling routes for roughly 45% of actors. But the selfish Nash equilibrium, it stubbornly settles at just 15.5%. So selfish actors adopt circular routing at merely a third of the optimal rate a coordinating planner would choose. Which brings us to Section 3, the Philippine informal economy. Let's take this theoretical math into the real world and put a number on trust. We're not just talking about a few dozen recycling plants here. We are looking at a massive, decentralized network of roughly 1.3 million actors. Think about that scale. This includes an estimated 1.1 million local sari-sari stores, hundreds of thousands of informal waste pickers, and local junk shops. It is a highly, highly complex web of human interactions. And within this massive network, players face crushing trust costs. In an informal economy without strict formal contracts, you have the friction of manually verifying material quality, the hassle of checking mobile payment screenshots, and just the constant perceived risk of unreliable partners. These trust costs act as a massive friction that makes circular routing privately unattractive, even if, it's absolutely the right thing for the collective. Using a rough Fermi estimate, basically a highly educated back-of-the-napkin calculation, the paper puts the Circular Kahampatan Index for this network at roughly 0.3 out of 1.0. A perfect alignment score would be 1.0. So that 0.3 means we are seeing massive inefficiency lost to selfish behavior and trust friction. But there's a silver lining. The model suggests that if we can implement interventions that reduce these trust costs, like, say, better digital payments or standardized grading, we could significantly raise that alignment score. Okay, Section 4, classical to quantum scaling. Let's look at how we solve the computational mystery, because taking this math from a few actors to millions is a huge hurdle. Calculating a Nash equilibrium is, frankly, computationally brutal. Classic brute force math fails really quickly. By a network of just 21 actors, evaluating every single scenario becomes grueling. Now, for certain simplified models, a mathematical aggregative reduction trick solves it for up to 100,000 actors. But for the complex, messy real world, we are ultimately going to need quantum algorithms. Let's look closer at that middle step. The researcher utilized something called an aggregative reduction, and this works beautifully for simplified models because it relies on the fact that an actor's costs depend mostly on their own strategy and the total number of other circular adopters, not the specific individual identities of their neighbors. By just tracking the total headcount of adopters, it essentially reduces an impossibly complex exponential equation into a solvable polynomial one, which is what allowed the researchers to test networks of 100,000 actors. But here's the catch. The real world isn't perfectly simplified. It has messy constraints. We're talking multi-commodity flows, physical capacity limits, complex local routing paths, and specific neighbor interactions. When we drop the simplified math, the problem becomes what computer scientists call p-space hard. To solve the Circular Kahampatan Index for true global networks, the paper suggests we will likely need future quantum algorithms, things like QAOA and QNash, to actually find those equilibria. Finally, Section 5, Kahampatan, Beyond Just Waste. Let's zoom way out to the philosophical and interdisciplinary roots of this entire framework. You might be wondering, where does the word Kahampatan actually come from? Well, the index borrows its name from a beautiful indigenous Ambala Aida concept from the Philippines. It represents relational well-being and collective flourishing. So a perfect CKI score of 1.0 represents true Kahampatan. It's a sacred alignment where your individual rational choices actually support our collective sustainability. You and the community flourish together. And this framework goes way beyond just physical trash. The author even proposes a fascinating analogy, an energy CKI. Think about our power grids. We could use this exact game-theoretic metric to measure if privileged sanctuary zones, like homes with subsidized net metering for solar panels, are actually imposing hidden costs and grid instability on uncertified lower-income consumers. It is the exact same problem, individual optimization misaligning with the collective system. Which brings us to the end of our explainer, leaving us with a really profound question to ponder. If doing what is purely logical for you ruins things for the rest of us, how can we redesign our systems to eliminate the cost of selfishness? The Circular Kahampatan Index shows us that sustainability isn't just an engineering problem about making better plastics. It is fundamentally a game theory problem about redesigning human trust. So next time you go about your day, think about the hidden trust costs in the interconnected systems you rely on. Thanks so much for joining me.